My name is Kimina Lyall, and I'm going to tell you a little story about something that happened to me and that I hope might actually serve as a warning for others and some lessons for others. If it does, great. I'm going to start at the end, and that is that I survived the Indian Ocean tsunami. More specifically, I survived the aftermath of the tsunami. I survived the consequences of the tsunami. I wasn't actually in the water, or the tsunami itself didn't touch me. I was standing up pretty much right at this position, watching the wave coming in. And yet, the consequences of that day and the consequences of being present in that day took me many, many years to recover. So the point I'm telling you that is, and the point of this whole story is that you don't actually have to be in the path of a disaster for it to be disastrous for you. So let me go back to the beginning. It was actually a beautiful day in that day. It was, everyone who was there will tell you, the weather was gorgeous. It was very similar to what it was here. And you would think that I ended up writing a book about my experiences, and I called it Out of the Blue, because at some level the tsunami did come out of the blue. But when I think about it and when I look back, we had lots and lots of warnings before. None of them were official. There was no sirens, there was no police, there was no one in authority telling us what to do. But we all knew what was going on. The first warning came at about 8 o'clock in the morning, and that was the earthquake itself. Some of you may remember that the tsunami was caused by an earthquake off the coast of Indonesia that was one of the largest earthquakes the planet has ever experienced. It was about 2.5 hours between the earthquake and the tsunami actually hitting us. So the earthquake at 8 o'clock in the morning hardly was felt by us at all. There was a little bit of a rumbling and a little bit of movement, and some people called from Bangkok and said, you know, hey, are you guys all right? There's been an earthquake. And we're like, yeah, we're cool. Everything's beautiful. It's a wonderful day. And we went on with our day. About half an hour later, at about 8:30, thereabouts, two marine biologists who were working on the beach that we were in, they were in part of a turtle conservation program, had a discussion with each other about something that they'd both heard quite separately, coming from the sound of coming from the sea. And it was this kind of whoosh sound. And they were fathoming it out. They couldn't figure out what that sound was. Was it dynamite fishing that had started again? Was it some kind of a, nuclear test that no one knew about in the Pacific or in the Indian Ocean? And anyway, they couldn't figure it out. We later calculated that what they had actually heard that morning was the sound of Banda Aceh being destroyed, 800 kilometres away. The sound had travelled across the water to us there. But again, no consequence, no discussion, no reaction. The next biggest warning came, and the biggest warning came when we heard this massive bang. It was just unbelievably loud. And wherever we all were, kind of meandering through our breakfast and meandering through the morning, we jumped up and we ran to the beach, because that's where the sound came from. And what we saw was the after effects of this massive wave that had come and hit the top of the dunes and then had rushed back into the sea. And at this time of the year in Thailand, the water is pretty much like that. It's pretty much like a lake. If you get a wave, you get excited, Someone was swimming and he was sort of struggling out of the water, and we laughed and we said to him, "So you just survived a tsunami," someone said, and everyone laughed and it was all a big joke. And then we noticed this. You can't really see that clearly, but there is a wave breaking on the horizon. And it was transfixing. It was so weird and so unusual and so out of context that it was transfixing. And we all stood and watched it come towards us. And the only way I can kind of describe it now, is looking back, is that it was kind of some kind of an advanced shock. It was like, huh? What? And I remember standing there, and everyone was doing it. There was 115 people on that beach that day. And pretty much 115 of us were lined up. It was almost like we thought there was a kind of protection, because waves come onto the beach. That's what waves do. So if we're not on the beach, then we're safe. So we were standing on the little grass at the edge of the top of the sand dunes, watching us and talking about it. What do you reckon that is? And why is it? Is that big? That looks pretty big to me. And I remember going back to my high school science and remembering that there's some formula for the height of a wave is double the trough and the depth of the water, and there's some, I don't know, someone here probably knows what it is, but I can't remember. And I was thinking, how big does a wave have to be breaking on the horizon? How deep is the, just having this conversation with myself, just standing there staring at it. And other people were sort of having discussions too about, wow, that's amazing, wow, that's awesome, isn't that cool? As you can see, getting out cameras, and people did that all up and down the coast. This you can't kind of see quite so well, but the horizon is kind of behind there. So there's this first wave and then there's this second wave. One thing that if you actually experience the water in any way, if you're into surfing or into swimming in the ocean, is that when you get a big set come in, the first wave is never the biggest. So our little baby wave that the first guy got caught up in, that was actually the warning system. What happened for me, I think, why did I survive? I often think about that. And I think what happened is I broke state. For some reason, I turned my back on that view. I just turned. And I started to kind of wander in the opposite direction. And then I saw this. So the way our beach was, there was a big, long main beach, and then there was a little bay beach next door. And that was full of water. Those boats had arrived a couple of minutes earlier and had, putted in in the water. And I was just, again, completely transfixed by this scene. What happened to the water? Where's it gone? Like, this is just the weirdest thing I've ever seen. And you can see the wave coming through there, and all of that normally is just a full bay. The guy taking the photographs in the earlier slide, I said to him, do you think we should, go up the little hill? And he said, yeah, we've got plenty of time. Got plenty of time. And that was the biggest mistake I think every single one of us made on that day, is that we thought we were in control. We thought we had the power to stay and watch it because it was interesting, and then when it no longer got interesting or when it got dangerous, then we could run for safety. We had enough time that day to get every single person on that beach to safety. We lost 14 people who all died unnecessarily because we didn't know to pay attention to the inner warning system that we had and the warning system that came from the ocean itself. I ended up walking up to that little kind of rocky outcrop, which is where that first photograph was. And as I was walking there, I was walking quite slowly, as that water was coming towards me. And I remember thinking, nobody else looks scared. Nobody else seems to be worried about this. I'm feeling a little bit scared, and I'm going to end up being laughed at. I was a grown woman, and I was afraid that people were going to laugh at me for being a scaredy cat. And I decided to be a scaredy cat anyway, and to climb up that little rock. And it was quite steep, and there was ropes and things you had to pull yourself up with. And I started to do it, and I think what happened is that the adrenaline started to kick in as I started to actually move my body. And then I really got scared, and there was a couple of kids that were coming up, following me up the hill. And I remember thinking, I don't want to be responsible for them not making it. And I reckon I got up there in about 3 seconds flat. You've probably heard of this idea of fight or flight that happens when you're in a kind of crisis situation, like the animal instinct of if in danger, you either fight it or you go running. And that's true, that is what happens. But there's something else that happens too as an alternative, and that is freeze. It's actually 3 Fs, fight, flight, or freeze. And I put it to you that that's the most dangerous one. If we freeze, we've really got Buckley's. And that's what everybody did that day, up and down that coast, is that they stood there and they froze in place. And the people that froze all were completely caught up in and connected with the tsunami in some way. When I got to the top, this is what I started to see. So the wave didn't come in. It wasn't like a kind of, there was a wave and then the wave goes out and then the next wave comes in and the wave goes out like surf waves. It was like a stack piled one on top of another. So it was like bang, 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 bang. And, everyone came in, the next one, and then there was, the inundation and the flooding, the debris. Everything that happened that day, I don't want to go into, obviously I was in a position where I was being the first responder and calling SOS and organising rescues and doing all that kind of stuff. And there was a lot
that I witnessed, and there was a lot that I experienced that was tough and hard and difficult to deal with. But that's not really the point of my talk. That's it finally going out. That's us gathering on the hill afterwards. Many people actually did make it to safety before the water came, but many didn't. And then what happened when you were in the water was random. You know, there's no rhyme or reason about who survived and who didn't. You know, there's no kind of, you know, really strong, young, fit people survived, didn't survive, older, babies survived, and some didn't. So it was just all random. But the point that I'm wanting to make here is that you've got to move. You've got to not freeze. I don't know what, hopefully none of you will ever be in a disaster. And if you are, it probably won't be a tsunami, just statistically. Could be anything. It could be car headlights coming at you down the wrong side of the road, or a wall suddenly moving weirdly, or somebody, you know, be walking past a pub and a fight spills out. All sorts of little and big disasters could come at you in your lifetime, or you could be in the position to be experienced. And I guess my point I want to make is, if you feel yourself being gasping, being in awe of what's happening and being frozen in place, you've got to find a way to kick out that. You've got to find a way to move and actually just get your body going, get the fluids going, get the adrenaline running, get into that flight or fight mode. Get out of there. Don't worry about if you end up being overreacting and people laugh at you. Laugh. Laugh with them. Laugh at yourself and be proud of yourself for having given yourself the chance. There's no guarantees. You can do that. You can run and still end up not surviving. And there are some disasters that, you know, you could be walking under a building and a pot plant falls off a shelf and lands on your head and you get no warning at all. But I reckon that there's quite a lot of little tiny hints, little tiny precursors in almost every disaster that you can pay attention to. So don't wait for someone in a uniform to tell you what to do. Don't wait to see what the expressions on other people's faces that they're scared, so therefore you should be. All of us afterwards said, no one seemed scared. I was really scared and I looked around and no one else seemed scared. Every single person I spoke to said that. If you're scared, just move, just get going, just get out of there. Because you don't want to be in a situation where you're grieving for someone else. And certainly no one else wants to be in a situation where they're creating a memorial for you on a beautiful beach, no matter how beautiful and gorgeous it is. So thank you.